this presentation, I will present two experimental studies on NPI licensing, processing, and acquisition in Mandarin Chinese. So to start with, what is NPI? So NPI is negative polarity items, so which are items that typically appear in negative expressions. So for instance, the English any is a typical negative polarity item. It can appear in the sentence, I did not read any books, but it cannot appear in the positive counterpart, I read any books. So in Chinese, there are two NPIs that are of interest in the two experimental studies. So the first one is renhe, which is translated as any, and the other one is shenme, which is translated as what. As you can see here, these two NPIs typically appear in negative context as in 没有人读了任何书 or 没有人读了什么书, no one reads any books, but they do not appear in the positive counterparts as in everybody reads any book. So for the presentation, I will start by showing Tsai et al. Study in 2013, where they used the MEG to study NPI processing in Mandarin. To specify the research question is, so which factor mainly affects speakers' processing of the NPI 任何? And to specify NPI appears in sentences with certain grammar, meaning, or communicative context. And this study is mainly to investigate the syntactic, so grammar and meaning semantic constraint. Then I show Huang and Crain study in 2014, where they investigated the NPI 什么. So for this NPI, it is ambiguous, so it can both mean not any or not much. And the second meaning is sensitive to context, so it requires extra contextual information. And the question they ask is, how do children acquire this meaning, acquire the meaning of 什么 since it's ambiguous, so which meaning is acquired first? So to start with, for Tsai et al., they try to investigate how people's processing of 任何 is mainly affected. So are they affected by the syntax or semantics? So to explain, NPI can be constrained by the three components in a theoretical perspective. So for syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. For syntax, it's commonly assumed that NPIs are licensed by negative words. So for instance, in the sentence, the student did not read any book, 学生没读任何书, where you can see here, may not scopes over this NPI 任何, and hence this NPI is licensed in this sentence. Otherwise, in this one, where 任何 scopes over may, so any scopes over the negative word, in that case, this NPI is not licensed and the sentence is judged ungrammatical. So this is the syntactic constraint found by previous studies. Secondly, semantically, NPI are commonly licensed by a downward entailing context. So for example, when you say the student did not read books, and since Oliver Twist is a book, the student did not read Oliver Twist. And in that kind of context, in that kind of sentence, since it's downward entailing, any can be added here before the noun phrase books. Otherwise, in this sentence, the student read books, Oliver Twist is a book, you cannot deduct the student read Oliver Twist from the previous two sentences. So in that case, this sentence is not downward entailing, and any cannot be licensed here in this sentence. And lastly, pragmatically, NPI normally normally has emphatic or attenuating meaning. So for instance, in the sentence, the student did not read books versus the student did not read any books, the second sentence is stronger and has this emphatic meaning, saying that really the student did not read even one single book. So the current study is mainly interested in the first two components discussed in NPI licensing, so syntax and semantics. And to investigate this research question, we can look at the previous literature on NPI. So several studies has found that semantic processing is related to NPI violation detection. So they find larger N400 with NPI violation. So to explain, N400 is normally related to contextual unpredictability in a sentence. So when there is a violation in context, speakers typically will show larger N400. And this is shown by the studies in investigating English and German. And similarly, some studies has also shown that syntactic processing is related to NPI violation detection. So they find a larger P600 with NPI violation. And P600 is normally assumed as a syntactic index, which shows that speakers are having a larger processing syntactic load in the experimental data. And you can see here there are two studies conducted in German and English, and both show a larger P600 with NPI violation. Now, to investigate this research, this question, they conducted an MEG study. So to explain, in the MEG study, the researchers, Tsai and al, was mainly interested in two index, that is M350 and M600. So as you can see here, M350 is this MEG recorded activity during this time frame, so around 350 milliseconds. And for M350, that's normally assumed to reflect a semantic processing like N400. And M600, on the other hand, show the brain activity within the time frame around 6 milliseconds, as shown here. And that's related to syntactic processing, just like P600. So in the current study, 38 native Mandarin speakers were recruited, and they were tested with 3 stimuli groups consist of 255 sentences. And the 3 groups are the NPI condition group, a syntactic control group, and filler sentences. So for the NPI group, they have a contrast. So one part of the sentences license NPI, and the other sentences do not license NPI. And as discussed before, a typical sentence that would license NPI as downward entailing, and that does not license NPI is not downward entailing. So for example, you can see here, in the downward entailing context, we have 派对上没有人吃任何蛋糕. So at the party, nobody eats any cake. And that should be judged acceptable by the speakers. But in the non-downward entailing context, 派对上每个人吃任何蛋糕. At the party, everybody eats any cake. That NPI is not licensed here, and it should be judged unacceptable by native speakers. So secondly, for the syntactic control group, they have this contrast between grammaticality. So for the grammatical sentence, they does not have aspect violation. And for the ungrammatical one, they have aspect violation. And the example sentences you can see here, for the grammatical sentence, you have 面包师傅已经预备了甜点, which is grammatical. For the perfective aspect, le is licensed in this sentence. And the second ungrammatical sentence, 面包师傅正在预备了甜点, where this aspect contradicts with this adverb here, which means in the process, while the aspect here actually show a perfective aspect. So that means the event is already completed. So there is an aspect violation and should be judged ungrammatical by native speakers. And lastly, for filler sentences, they have sentences of various syntactic structures. And there are 60 sentences for each condition within the NPI group and 30 sentences for each condition within the syntactic control group. And they also included 75 sentences in the filler group. Also, the participants were asked to answer if the sentence they saw contained the word 葡萄. That is a way to avoid certain training effect in this experiment, and that will be explained later in the experiment process. So in the process, 5 blocks of 5 blocks, the experiment was divided into 5 blocks and each contains 51 trials. So as we can see here, this is an example trial, and the trial start with a central fixation point, and the sentence is shown here in consecutive phrases. And typically for the target phrase of interest, so 任何 here, it is shown for 600 milliseconds to ensure that both P600 and M350 can be shown in the MEG data. And the others, the duration of presentation of other stimuli, other phrases are dependent on the number of characters of that construction. So after each trial, the participant will be shown a question mark on the screen for 100 milliseconds, and they will be asked, does the sentence have the word 葡萄? And if yes, they will press the button with their right hand. So what the experiments find is that firstly, semantic processing is mainly responsible for detecting NPI violation. And they also did not find the M600 effect as previous studies, but that is indeed reported in the syntactic control group. So in detail, as we can see here, the NPI violation condition does show a higher M350 here, and compared to the syntactic control group where there is no M350 effect. And in addition, as for the M600 effect, you can see here for the NPI condition with or without violation, there is no M600 effect reported here. But for the syntactic control group, you can see a M600 effect as here. So for the second study, which is Huang and Crain in 2014, they tried to answer how do children acquire the ambiguous NPI shenme in Mandarin. So specifically, they want to answer which meaning is acquired first. So to start with, shenme has two readings, and the first one is the NPI reading any, and as in the sentence, 张三没吃什么东西. 张三 did not eat any food. But also it can have the insignificance reading not much, as in the sentence, 张三没吃什么东西，只吃了一个饼干. 张三 did not eat much food, just some biscuits. So for Huang and Crain, they conducted a truth value judgment task, and 81 Mandarin speaking children and 42 adults were recruited for this experiment. And in the experiment, the participants were divided into 4 age groups. So 5-year-old group, 7-year-old group, 8-year-old group, and adults. And for adults and the 5-year-olds, they are divided into 2 task groups. So group A are tested with shenme, which is the ambiguous NPI of interest in this experiment. And group B are tested with the NPI renhe, which is unambiguous. And for the procedure, children were tested with puppets telling stories. So for instance, they will be shown with the puppets and toys here, and the experimenter will tell them, so one experimenter will tell them the story. So as you can see here, an example story. So it basically tells that Miss Dog ate a big pizza, a big hamburger, a vegetable noodle dish, and Miss Pig only ate a small soft prawn as here. And after the children heard the story, another experimenter will play with the puppet and explain some parts of the story. So typically the mouse puppet here will have 2 statements, and the children will be asked if his explanation was correct or not. And for the group A children or adults who is tested with the with shenme, they will be tested with statements just like 小狗吃了很多东西，可是小猪没吃什么东西. So Miss Dog ate a lot, but Miss Pig hardly ate anything. And this statement is only true with the not much reading, but it's not true with the not any reading. And for the group B, so the control group, they are tested with renhe, which is unambiguous. And the sentence is 小狗吃了很多东西，可是小猪没吃任何东西. So Miss Dog ate a lot, but Miss Pig did not eat anything. And for that sentence, it's always false for the story. And there will be also filler sentences, which can be either true or false. And one example sentence is here. 小狗吃的是海鲜面. So Miss Dog ate seafood noodle, which is true in this case. So what they find is that children acquire the any reading first for the ambiguous NPI shenme. And in addition, they find that children starts to acquire the insignificance reading, so the not much reading, by the age of 7. So as we can see here in the data, for the 5-year-old group, they have a comparatively lower percentage in yes responses compared to that of adults. So children only show 25% in answering yes to the shenme sentence statements, while adults, 80% of their judgments say that statement is true. So that shows the adults have access to the not much reading, while children of 5-year-old basically does not. And in addition, they show that children starts to acquire the not much reading, and we can see here that the percentage of yes responses grow as the children gets older. And from the 5-year-old to the 7-year-old group, we can see the children starts to judge the shenme sentence as true from below 50% to above 50%. And that shows that they are starting to acquire this not much reading, which will make that judgment true. So the take-home message is that, so in the first study, they show that semantics but not syntactic processing is mainly responsible for NPI violation detection. And in the second study, they show that pragmatic factor can affect NPI acquisition. As in the study, the not much reading of the NPI shenme, which would require additional pragmatic information as argued in the paper, was acquired later by Mandarin-speaking children, while the non-reading, so the NPI reading, which require less pragmatic information, is acquired first. And thanks for your time. This is all of my presentation.